2020 has reshaped the perception of tech in K-12 both in and out of the classroom. Practically, how hybrid education and its ability to really assess learning of students is now what everyone in the education industry has to answer. We warmly welcome our panel, starting with Ms. Surabhi Goel, CEO, Aditya Birla World Academy. Good morning. Warm welcome. We also have with us Dr. Biswajit Saha, Director-Vocational and Training, CBSE. Very, very good morning. We have with us Mr. Raghav Podar, Chairman, Podar Education, and Mr. Chandrahas Panigrahi, Co-founder and CEO, Edukemy. The session will be moderated by Ms. Punita Kapoor, Deputy Editor, Entrepreneur India. A very, very good morning and warm welcome to all of you all.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone.
Hi, good morning, everyone.
It's all over to you, Ms. Kapoor.
All right. Thank you. Thanks, Muskan. Thanks for the introduction, and let me take it forward. We all know the way education industry has been changed in the last 1 year, and everyone can vouch for it, that it's not only just physical or just online, which will be the future of education. It's going to be the hybrid education, which we all see as the future of education. And that's why we have gathered today to discuss this with some of the industry stalwarts. So starting with you, Surabhi, I know that you handle Aditya Birla Education Academy, which is a platform for teachers to further their professional development through courses. So tell me, what kind of changes you bring about in the courses to make them relevant to take forward this technological adoption and digital transformation, which has been happening from the last 1.5 years?
So Punita, the teachers have been literally thrown at the deep end and expected to completely unlearn what they've been doing over the years and learn absolutely new strategies to be able to teach online. Now, what happens typically is when we say teaching online, people just think that I have to do the same thing that I was doing offline, which is stand in front of a classroom of students and be able to teach them. And I take the same model up on, say Zoom or Google Classroom or whatever else that I'm using. But that's not how it works, because you also need to still do collaborative tools. You still need to encourage engagement and communication. And all of this is wonderful because, students are digitally, they're born into the internet space. So they totally understand this, right? So in fact, it's a better way of teaching sometimes for, this whole blended learning and using tech tools and all of that. What we need to do is just train our educators to be able to do that. And there is lots of training available, which are very inexpensive. Some of it is free. And I think, it's like this never waste a good crisis. So now we have access to facilitators from across the world. So what we have been able to do over the last 1.5 years has, we've got some stalwarts from, CBSE, IGCSE, IB curriculum. And, there are these trainers who have been able to work with teachers who otherwise would have flown down and, the whole exercise would be very, very expensive. We've been doing master classes once a week across, the entire year. So we've had 50 people who've conducted master classes, on how one teaches online. There are the University of Pennsylvania, which has gone its online teaching learning program to India. So the point I'm trying to make is that all we need to do is really handhold the educators and the teachers, and they will be able to embrace the new normal, of course, subject to the digital device and, divide and all of those other issues. But I think the teachers have done a fabulous job in being able to embrace the new normal.
Sure. So, have you seen any particular ways through which maybe teachers have also adopted more normal, maybe will come up with new suggestions on their own?
Yes, absolutely. So I think one of the biggest change that has happened, and I think in a positive way, has been with the assessments, right? So, we've always been talking about how we need to relook at assessments, and we should not be, doing the rote learning method where everybody just memorizes and, then just goes and takes an exam. Now, finally, schools have been compelled to look at assessments in a different way. And, we have to bring in the continuous assessment and, marry the whole formative, summative assessment, be able to do it online, offline. So I think, this has been a very big learning area, of course, for teachers and for educators. And it has finally pushed us all to start looking at assessment in a different way.
Sure. So coming to you, Mr. Saha, we are all talking about assessment and various other aspects. And since you have been heading the board at CBSE, what kind of changes do you see in assessment in last year and during this year also, when we have seen, okay, class 12 exams are being cancelled, and now we are talking about 30-40-30 ratio coming up?
Thank you, Punita. And of course, all eminent panelists, Surabhi, Raghav, and Chandrahas. In regards to assessment, I think country has seen a kind of decisions which, at least personally, I have not ever heard of. And from the side of board also, kind of decisions of cancelling the examinations. It is actually that last mile decisions we have ever taken. Now, considering all the perspectives, one way the planning and other issues containing to how we are going to conduct the exams and other issues. At this point of time, we are discussing with mainly with our stakeholders, school leaders, and especially with the teachers community. And we have already come up with certain plan. Very soon we are going to announce it. Mm-hmm. There, the format, of course, we have already experienced this kind of things, that continuous assessment in terms of maybe exams. Board may like to conduct exams twice in a year. So all those modalities subject to the approval of our governing body and other modalities as we are used to do it, so that continuous phenomena in assessment and changes towards looking into the competency and learning outcomes. Even the model of assessment, what we are used to with that may be shifted to competency-based assessment. So where this kind of multi-model may works. So subject to the acceptance of the schools, authorities and all. So from class 9 to 12, a kind of innovative format, which already somewhere school experimented, or they are otherwise also they are used to do it, because if whether it is board-led or school-led, those functional decisions will come up, and with utter confidence on our school management, both from the government side as well as private side, at CBSE has trying to come up with accreditations model, so that quality of curriculum transactions, and whatever Surabhi has rightly mentioned, that in terms of curriculum transactions, how far that competencies and learning outcomes are achieved by the student, that measuring yardsticks can be of different forms. So one way we are empowering the schools more towards internal assessment, project-based learning, and different methodologies of assessment. Not only that year-end 3 hours assessment is going to be the criteria for the result declaration. The way we have come up with that 30-40 Bala ratios, the same concept in a different perspective that empowering the teachers and students and parents, because here parents are also equally important at this stage, because as again Surabhi has mentioned, that the same model, same framework may not be acceptable for the curriculum transaction. And at home also we are experiencing many innovative practices are being carried out by the teacher one way, but at the same time, how far it is accepted by the large segment of the student. So some students are enjoying, some students are not enjoying. So kind of brainstorming and reviewing the process internally, so that art integrations and other collaborative efforts comes, and ultimately we can empower the students towards to become a global citizen. So these assessment dynamics all together, that lot of changes would be there, and hopefully in coming month we may come up with some strategic interventions.
Sure. So Dr. Saha, if you could point out any specific strategic decision at the board which you took personally.
You see, as I have in my initial comments also, I try to focus upon and let it officially come up so that it would be more easy to discuss, number one. But as we are discussing on that hybrid model, so it is also kind of hybrid kind of framework where the one-way autonomy of the schools, the trust on the schools, and the process, how we can define the process of assessment so that ultimately whatever schools gives, we are relying at this point of time. And the same process, so the ethical and unethical issues, how we can minimize so that affordable schools, so-called elite schools, so-called government schools, and schools in a remote villages in aspirational districts, in every domain, how far these online method of teachings are successful. So board is continuously trying to interact with the school management. Sometimes randomly we connect with the teacher, student, and this is a kind of everyday affairs for the last 1.5 years for all of us. So understanding this ethos and complete ball game, we are actually, personally speaking, that complete online shifting, at least although technology and other Mr. Panigrahi may not agree, but this is not the time to shift complete curriculum transactions into online method. Because ultimately in future, then think of that other health issues, screen problem, and mental well-being. The actually whole school approach has a certain meaning. And everyone in the panels would agree, and especially Raghav, Surabhi, you will agree with me that unless until physically students are coming to these school premises, the other pillars of educations, they are not going to complete. Okay, one way curriculum. So in whole school approach, curriculum transaction is not the only issue parents or student or generation or as a nations we are aiming. Otherwise, everybody can go, and the way homeschooling is and virtual schooling, so we can promote, and CBSE can only give affiliations to all virtual schools. So let everybody connect from home and do the schooling. The real meaning of schooling has something else, which we understood over a period of multiple decades, and those things we don't want to diminish by name of pandemic. There would be a technological penetration, and that's why I think I like the topic. The hybrid model will coexist, and there all the traditional methodology, technology orientations, interventions, project-based learning, everything we can club by name of hybrid, so that the real meaning of both assessment, real meaning of curriculum transactions, we can carry out seamlessly. And again, in case of technology interventions, we need a good quality e-content developer, the subject experts who are comfortable to deliver this lecture in the online platform, because there are so many freeware, free LMS. So again, these issues also very much crucial. I like to just flag so that other can take over. The issue pertaining to that data security.
Right.
Issue because so many children's data are there in XYZ cloud. Okay, XYZ organizations, I'm not naming, are giving a free platform to the schools, but where the data resides? So it is the classroom interaction, the physically and the videos are being recorded. Okay, for time being, let me assume so without creating a controversy on that matter. But school management need to think of that security perspective. Then there is a question of open source versus closed source. So that in case of closed source, only certain leading organizations are coming. But in case of open source, the way Moodle functions before the pandemics, OpenEdX and other organizations are very much, so the data codes are freely available. Now, how many schools management, especially who are managing the group, For them, I think it would be quite effective to create a indigenous LMS based on that freely available open source software. And ultimately, the cloud ownerships would be there in India so that a future data safety and security can be defined accordingly. The last issue is towards the LMS framework, because that framework, that standard operating procedure for operating the LMS, again, we need to focus upon, because how children learn and how teachers teach and understand that learning process, there are so many psychological interventions and research dynamic region-wise. Whatever we are discussing at Delhi, that may not be functional in the any village in Kerala. So that perspective in Northeast, the observations capacity towards arts and literature, they are very much capable. Linguistics ability and music, but they are how stamped interventions we can come up with some logical conclusion, how these things are addressing by the existing platform and by existing teachers, how they are functioning with the platform. Those issues need to be discussed. And that combinations of so-called online packaged form of your delivery. So there are also so many color combinations to competencies, a lot of technical jargons will come. So we need to discuss, and then only truly we can establish a hybrid model. And that hybrid model will exist forever. It is not that after pandemics, this is going to be seized by the school management. I think they will love to keep it retained so that parental communications between the teacher and student, and anytime teachers can communicate with the student in terms of any difficulty, doubt. So through asynchronous learning beyond the schools, I think hybrid model is going to promote. Thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Saha. Some really valid points you've made. So coming to you, Raghav, I think you can answer it much better in terms of as an educationist. How are you taking forward the journey of seeing the future of hybrid education?
Right. Thank you, Punita. And you're absolutely right. The future is now. Well, the education system of the entire world, the way education is delivered to students, is at the cusp of a dimensional shift. The way curriculum was transacted up until now has been disrupted by this pandemic, and we have to ensure it's for the better. Now, the way the pandemic hit us, there's no doubt in anyone's mind that digital transformation has changed the way education is delivered in classrooms across the world. More importantly, though, is the purpose aligned with the way these trends are emerging? In this hot pursuit of the latest in virtual learning environments and AR, VR, and other digital transformations, have we missed the woods for the trees? It's not a question of if, but when, at least some of these technologies will become mainstream in schooling across the globe. And why do I say that? Because the new normal, as said rightly by Dr. Saha as well, the new normal is going to be hybrid. It's going to be blended, or what is called phygital. Phygital is a mix of physical and digital. But the fundamental question still lies, is that are we serving the purpose of education, getting our children ready with those 21st century skills, or are some schools just finding fancier ways of lesson delivery through e-pedagogues? Now, there is no better time than a crisis that forces us to grow and wakes us up from that slumber of rudimentary pedagogy. We can ill afford another education system that tests students in and prepares students for skills that they won't require in their 21st century lifetimes. This is that time of transition where the trends are still forming and evolving, and it is incumbent upon us, especially the education thought leaders, the influencers, who have to shoulder this responsibility to steer this evolution of education in the direction which will truly benefit our 21st century students the most. Our posterity is going to look back at this time as one of those defining moments that comes once in centuries. And they'll either thank us for the direction in which we took the evolution of education, or they will curse us for not rising up to the occasion when we had the opportunity. We're preparing children for jobs that don't exist yet. They are going to be solving problems that we don't even know are problems yet, by using technologies that haven't even been invented yet. So we are preparing as educationists children for that future 20, 30, 40 years from now, when honestly, none of us know what the next 2, 3, 4 years are going to look like. So my appeal to parents and educators is that rather than trying to pin down life to these boxes, pigeonholes of certainties, we have to learn to embrace uncertainty. That's where the beauty of life lies. All of us educators had these wonderful plans prepared. I would speak to educationists and they would tell me 2 years from now, I can tell you what is going to be done in August for my children. This is the planning I have. All those plans got washed away by the COVID crisis. And then we had a second plan that we made saying that, yes, now everyone's going to restart schools 4 or 5 months ago, 6 months ago. And then came the second wave of the COVID crisis. And again, everything got washed away. So this is the time to truly espouse, live, breathe, imbibe those 21st century skills, those future ready skills that we all once sagaciously foretold on the ramparts of the biggest education conclaves. And what were those skills we used to talk about? The ability to cope with limited resources, to be agile, flexible, adaptable, the ability to be resilient, skill of crisis management, self-reliance, independence, making our children critical thinkers, problem solvers. Now, honestly, which of these skills do our exams truly measure today? Almost none. And that is why it's so welcoming. It's such a positive thought that Dr. Saha is talking about this, how the entire assessment system in the minds of the CBSE is changing. India, unfortunately, over decades and decades, the role of schools has become a building which prepares students for exams. That's not the purpose of schooling. We prepare students for the exam called life. We care so much, parents care so much about the amount of marks a child receives in their life, but they forget to care whether the child leaves a mark with their life. And that is what the focus should lie. So that entire shift from content mastery to competence mastery is what the focus should lie on. And it is very, very positive to see that CBSE has been pushing for that. Of course, it's not something that can be done overnight. CBSE does have 21,000 schools. And like Dr. Saha said, you have to consider the so-called elite schools and the mid-range schools and the schools in the villages and all of that. So it needs to be something that is implementable effectively, not only for one section of schools, but across all schools. But what matters is we're all thinking in the right progressive way. And with that, we are going to achieve that futuristic learning what our children need. And I think it's very positive to see that other schools, other education bodies are also focusing on heuristic learning. What is heuristic learning? Self-directed, self-led, self-owned learning. We talk about pedagogy. This is heutagogy. Heutagogy is when the child is the owner of their learning, and that is the highest form of learning a child can achieve. So heuristic learning is something at Podar we really, really focus a lot on. And I'm glad that CBSE and other national level bodies are focusing on that as well.
Sure. So at Podar, I mean, how difficult or easy it was to go through this digital transformation process, and how are you adopting all those changes which you've just mentioned?
So Podar is a big group. So there were a lot of our schools that had already moved onto some form of digital learning, which was done online, virtually. It was more for remedial classes and all of that. So that was before the pandemic even happened. So those schools transitioned very smoothly into it. Of course, there were other schools that had not yet done it, of Podar as well. But I think it was March 22nd or March 23rd that the Prime Minister gave the lockdown orders. And it was by March 29th that we had already started our virtual learning environments with our students. So there was it was almost like a leapfrog into being thrust into that position. Then we had 1 month of basically April classes, and then summer break was spent throughout those 6 weeks of summer break. Teachers, head office, principals, non-academic staff were immersed fully into that training and upskilling of teachers of that digital transformation. Because a lot of the teachers, especially the elder ones, the ones who are above 50, were not necessarily digital natives. They didn't take to digital technology like, say, some of the younger teachers did. But what we found out in that procedure, in that journey, was that these teachers who believed that, no, I'm not very good at technology. Technology and me don't get along. It doesn't work with me. I prefer that regular style of teaching. Those teachers had set those glass ceilings for themselves. And now, because they were thrust in and forced into those positions, they broke those glass ceilings, those barriers. And today, those teachers are some of the best teachers who are still providing these online classes. And at the end of the day, education is not just about transacting curriculum. It's not a transactional phenomenon. At the end of the day, education is simply about the human relationship. So a teacher who can achieve that human relationship with a student, whether physically or online, is anyways going to be a superior teacher than one who necessarily knows her mastery of the subject, but doesn't know how to connect with her listener. That is far more important.
Yeah. Sure. Thanks, Raghav. So coming to you, Mr. Panigrahi, would you tell us more on how Edukemy has been working along with schools to make sure that, okay, the hybrid education, which we have all been talking about, take place seamlessly?
Okay, hi. Hey, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Shah. Thanks, Surabhi and Raghav and Punita for this opportunity. We're not in schools yet, but what we do is Edukemy is basically into the test learning prep for government UPSC exams. Right? That's how we have gone. What all of you say is what I completely agree. For a change, I'm not the one who's going to go against the motion, but I want to put some few things, which is basically the way we have thought through or envisioned Edukemy the way it is to. We have most of the tech platforms that you see are either video hosting sites or a marketing engine to acquire students, right? That's not the way. The right way is, and therefore that is what we are bringing in through a TCE model. The TCE model is teaching and pedagogy. C stands for content, experience, and E stands for evaluation. I think all of which you have touched upon. The TCE model, what we have done is we have kept students and we have kept teachers, educators as a center of the platform. Therefore, if you look at what does a student need, and we will obviously move to K-12 over the next very soon in the next 2 years, is because what does a student need, and therefore what does a teacher need, and there comes a problem statement. A student typically, he's swimming in a whole huge amount of content that he has to study, right? So you need someone to curate the content. That's typically the teacher does that. He definitely looks for collaborating with his peers, and that is why we need a physical presence of they typically, so far it has been a physical experience. Going forward, it could be a platform on which they can peer-to-peer learning. They also want to plan their study schedules, right? So therefore, they have to have what they call as a study table, which can be prepared for them. And all of this can be done by tech, by the way. That's where I look at tech as an enabler to all of these things and supplement the experience that the students are going through. To Dr. Shah and to Raghav, I think that's essentially what we stand for. And what also students look for, and that's what Raghav was telling multiple times, a good mentor, a teacher who can connect with him, can give him a personalized direction. That's probably Surabhi is what is kind of explaining. What does an educator look after? They look for. Educator looks for a regular feedback or how is he or she progressing in the class. Do we have a mechanism, methodology, which could be in a way that it could be done through tech and it could be very, very fast. So that's definitely one way where there's a tech intervention. He or she wants to be updated with the latest that's happening. Even for teaching students, please understand they are teaching digital natives. Even while you're teaching, they're actually Googling. I've seen my younger daughter Googling, and the moment the teacher says something, she's Googling, right? So a teacher has to be a step ahead of them. So how does he or she stays updated? Where does he or she gets the content to get updated? Many of the teachers, which Raghav and Surabhi would agree with me, they find evaluation is time consuming, right? And therefore they need tech to help them solve, both in subjective and objective. Therefore, that's where we have actually, developed a tool, the first of its kind subjective assessment tool, which actually gives a line-by-line assessment of the subjective exams like social studies, geography, history, which can speed up the process of evaluation much faster. I mean, it actually improves, in our estimate, at least 75% of the time, which means if you are in an hour, you are doing 5 evaluations, you can actually end up doing over 15 to 20 evaluations, right? So that's where we are getting tech interventions to solve real life problems. There is also this concept which Surabhi did mention about train the teacher, train the trainer, as they call it, right? So which means teaching the teachers through using an incubator model. I believe Surabhi, you were talking about that. And I think that's where also tech can come in, using data analytics to provide as to how and what to do and teach the classes. I think all of this we've taken into a platform and developed what we call as a TCE model, wrapped it around with the evaluation model, and we are currently using it for our UPSC exams, mostly for a government test prep, but we envisage that the platform is such that after a successful run here, we'll be able to extend it to schools, because there's a lot of human literature and studies that have been taught there. And if I were to ask you, I think in the last 14 months of our existence, we had a very encouraging results. We have had about 8,000 learners, paid learners, who have actually given us an ARPU of roughly 10,000 rupees. So I think that's a very strong validation of what we are doing, more than in solving the real problem as a vision. So this is what I just wanted to add. So therefore, we come in as an enabler to the problems that you say. Even in evaluation, for example, evaluation is multiple things. Evaluation could be things like how much effort versus what results I am getting. Where do I stand among my peers? How much is my success gap to reach? Who's the best student topper of, for example, I get into class 9, the teacher should be able to evaluate, okay, last year, these were the 10 students who were toppers. What was the behavior and what were the evaluation? How am I going to be close to them? That's where the personalized mentorship comes in. And that's essentially is what our platform is all about.
Sure. Thanks, Mr. Panigrahi, for the brief update. And I thank all of you, because it's time for us to wrap up, and there's another session in progress. So I've been asked to close this session now. So to conclude, I can rightfully say that while technology will play an essential role in education moving forward, student success is highly reliant on high quality teaching, and it doesn't matter whether it happens through online or offline. So thank you so much to all of you for joining us today on this wonderful session and sharing your thoughts.
Thank you.